On the 14th of April, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln was shot while viewing a performance at Ford Theater in Washington, D.C. This event and its perpetrator, John Wilkes Booth, are a well-known part of American history. What is less known is the incident involving the kin of these two well-documented historical figures. Robert Todd Lincoln was born on August 1, 1843, in Springfield, Illinois. He was the eldest of the future president's children, and quite tragically the only one that would ever live to see adulthood. His relationship with his father was distant for most of his life, as by the time of his birth his father was already well established in politics and ran a successful law career. In 1859, at the age of 16, Robert went to attend school in New Hampshire, before being accepted into Harvard in the midst of the Civil War. By this time, he had almost no contact with his father on account of his presidency and the ongoing conflict. The story of how Abraham Lincoln's son was saved from what could have very easily been his death is one of tragedy and random coincidence. Sometime in either 1863 or 1864, Robert recalls an event that took place on a train platform in Jersey City, New Jersey. He was on his way to Washington, D.C. while on holiday from his aforementioned studies at Harvard. Robert was standing in line for tickets when he was pushed by a crowd into the side of a waiting train car. The car then began to move, and Robert fell into the narrow space between the car and the station platform. This was obvious case for concern, as the event of being sucked under the train's wheels would have most certainly resulted in Robert's untimely death. Before anything of the sort could happen, Robert was pulled up by his collar to safety on the platform. The man responsible for this deed was Edwin Booth. If that name sounds somewhat familiar, that would be because it was none other than John Wilkes Booth's older brother. Edwin, like his father, was considered one of the greatest Shakespearean actors of the 19th century. Thus, his personage was well known to many. Robert Lincoln would write this about his savior in a 1909 letter. Upon turning to thank my rescuer, I saw it was Edwin Booth, whose face was of course well known to me, and I expressed my gratitude to him, and in doing so called him by name. This entire incident is one of unprecedented coincidence, as no more than a couple short years later, these two men would be linked yet again by one of the most monumental moments of the 19th century. To understand why the Lincoln assassination was so tragic not only for Robert and his family, but also for Edwin, we must take a look at the politics that separated him from his younger brother. You see, Edwin was a staunch Unionist and supporter of Lincoln and his presidency, while John has gone down in history as being one of the most notable secessionists in U.S. history. Needless to say, this put intense strain on the brothers' relationship. According to accounts by Edwin, his brother believed that Lincoln would be made king of America. Whether or not his remark was sarcastic, it does show an insight into just how much John despised and perhaps even feared President Lincoln's time in the White House. When news of his brother's actions reached Edwin on the morning of April 15th, he was devastated, and would state that it was the most distressing day of his life. Not only at the fact that his brother had just become one of America's most infamous assassins, but also at the death of who he saw as one of the nation's greatest leaders. He would write this to the owner of the Boston Theater. "The news of the morning has made me wretched indeed, not only because I have received unhappy tidings of the suspicions of a brother's crime, but because a good man and a most justly honored and patriotic ruler has fallen in an hour of national joy by the hand of an assassin." There is little doubt that Edwin, stricken with grief, thought about that day in Jersey City, where he saved the son of a man who his brother would later go on to murder.